Earlier this year, we welcomed the guys from Atomic Ninja Studios to come talk about their upcoming project, Dead End, on Kickstarter. Unfortunately, it was delayed, so disregard the dates in this episode. The Kickstarter is currently on from September 17th to October 17th. Let's learn about Dead End.
Yeah. You're listening to the Wild Die Podcast. 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 Listen 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 to the Wild Die Podcast.
All right, welcome to this bonus episode of the Wild Eye Podcast. My name is Eric Lamoureux, aka No Sleeves McGee, and with me, my co-host for today, but also special guest, Carl Kiesler. How's it going,
Hey,
Carl?
good. How are you doing, Eric?
Hanging in there, social distancing.
Yep.
Yeah, been doing that since 1976, so pretty good at it.
You're the champ, huh?
Yeah. So, today for this bonus episode, we've got the guys from Atomic Ninjas, the studio for Dead End. They got a Kickstarter coming up, that setting that they've been talking about for years and years and years, and now finally it's ready. So I'll ask you guys to introduce yourself, and people want to know, what's your favorite zombie movie? Let's start with Jared.
Hi, I'm Jared, a.k.a. Savage Daddy Gunning, and hands down, without a doubt, because I'm a zombie purist, it's Night of the Living Dead, 1968, black and white, George R. Romero.
Nice.
There are no other zombie movies.
All right, now that we know that, about Carl, because Carl's also doing work for that team.
Yeah, I'm doing the art. I've worked on a Jumpstart, and so I'm Carl. So one of my favorite zombie movies. There's a lot of them. I like Return of the Living Dead. I love that movie. I love where they got the brains from, more brains, and send more cops. All that stuff. It's an amazing movie. I love that movie.
I like the third one, with the toxic waste and the chick that kind of into. That's so good.
Yeah, that's a good one too.
Dustin.
I'm going a little bit off script for this one, and I actually like The Evil Dead.
Nice.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not the same kind of zombies, but the Deadites are zombies in a way.
Mm-hmm.
They are. So, yeah. David.
David Scott, probably the guy that's known for all the rules at Atomic Ninja. If I had to pick a favorite zombie movie, my first shot would have to be World War Z, just to watch Jared and Jeff lose their minds. But no, in all seriousness, the one I enjoy the most has got to be Shaun of the Dead. It's that reversal of the trope. It goes complete comedy with it. It's like all the zombie movies are great. You love Romero, love Kirkman stuff with Walking Dead, and I love the old Max Brooks book that World War Z was supposed to have been based on, and then they just threw the whole book in the dumpster and lit it on fire because they did nothing that came close. But Shaun of the Dead just gave you that comedy twist that I think we all need occasionally, especially you get into something that heavy. You need that comedy to kind of break things up.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
On a side note, you're dead to me, Dave. Just kidding.
Well, the book was good, but yeah, the movie was, yeah. How about you, Jeff?
I'm Jeff Friedman. Mine has to be Bruce Campbell versus the Army of Darkness. That's just, for me, that has always been one of my favorites. But I'm more of a comedy guy than a horror guy. So Shaun of the Dead, anything with Bruce Campbell in it with the zombies, all the Deadites. Just, I agree with Dustin. Those are just amazing movies.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Bruce and his movies. Even Baba Hotep. Well, that's mummies. That's different, but so good. My name is Bruce. So that's going to be kind of a lead in to Dead End. What is Dead End? How is it different from what most people know in Savage Worlds for Zombies, which is War of the Dead? It's been around for a long time, and now all you guys' favorite zombie movies, there's got to be one in there that's a bit closer to the vision. I'm going to ask Jared this because he's the whole mastermind behind this.
It's definitely Dead End is not a zombie game. It is a survival horror game that features zombies. So that's the distinction. That's what makes it different from any other basic Savage World setting you're going to encounter. It is a knockdown, drag out meat grinder of a survival story. It leans heavily into hazards like starvation, finding food. The zombies are a backdrop to that. They're a danger. They can be mitigated fairly easily if you play it smart. But anything you do that draws attention or draws noise. The reason we started doing Dead End, the reason I started Dead End, is because I played the War of the Dead. I enjoyed it, but I think it suffers from the same flaw for me in the zombie genre, in that you find with The Walking Dead, and that it's too action oriented. I wanted to create something when I first started pitching the idea for playtest early on of some of the the very, very rudimentary basic rules. I was pitching that for playtesters on Google Hangouts for virtual tabletop as this setting makes The Walking Dead look like Sesame Street.
Okay.
And I will say that we still have that same vision when you get to, years later, all the playtesting we've gone through. This setting makes Walking Dead look like Sesame Street. You are not going to be gung-ho action heroes capping zombies in the head and driving all over the place. It's not that kind of game. You can play it that way. But I think it's going to attract more of a crowd that enjoys survival horror. And I think one of the things, too, that you hear a lot with Savage Worlds is the perception that, it's a pulpy game system. It can't do horror. Yeah. Hold my beer and watch this because it'll do horror. And it will do horror incredibly well with doing certain setting rules. I'll let Dave dive a little bit more deeper into the setting rules to set it apart. But one of my favorites to this day has been a thing we came up with called Fate is Cruel. And essentially, whenever you roll a 1 on the wild die, that's it. You're done. No more rerolls. On top of that, characters cannot soak wounds in this setting.
Yeah, like I said, I read that this morning. So it's a lead in, and I was going to ask Dave, actually, because, so, yeah, you mentioned Savage Worlds, pulpy action, and it's a feature, and the combat mechanics are robust, and people have fun with that. And then I read the setting rules, and I'm like, nobody's gonna want to go into combat with anybody, or you're stupid if you do, because you're probably going to die. So what kind of encounters can we expect from a typical Dead End campaign or session, and what kind of mechanics were brought in, or innovations with setting rules, or whatever to beef that up, to give it a bit more substance and fun instead of just maybe one roll and things like that? Or is it just basically up to the GM to make, because I would imagine a lot of social encounters, very tense social encounters with other survivors to get through, another day survival, get some food, or get through somewhere. Can you talk a bit about that, David? If my question makes sense and I didn't trail off too much.
I mean, you definitely rambled across about like 6 different topics there, but I can try to encapsulate that. The first thing we did to really kind of set Dead End apart in the combat scheme is we really took a hard look at zombies in Savage Worlds. Zombies in Savage Worlds are your classic like high fantasy zombie, like the summoned dead or the magically resurrected that serve the necromancer. They kind of do a little bit more damage than we thought they ought to do. They had a lot of stats associated with them, including like thinking stats and smarts. And we just started throwing that stuff all directly in the bin. The idea was that in the classic zombie pictures we wanted to kind of encapsulate, you had this shambling horde that has no motivation, no drive other than consume the living. And you see, like the classic, one of the classic moments is you get the zombies that are following a sound and they'll walk off of a cliff or they'll walk right into a wood chipper. And quite essentially, you couldn't achieve that in Savage Worlds without a GM that had 100% buy-in to playing them that way, because the stats really allowed the characters to do so much more. So what we did is we basically took all stats away from zombies. We made it so that movement is an action. We made it so that the lethality of a zombie is that if they bite you, you're basically dead. So that zombies are more of like a hazardous terrain type situation. So you end up treating zombies almost more as an impetus for the characters to keep moving because of just this mass horde that they have to outrun. Or you know, you're in the middle of a nasty gunfight with other people, other survivors, and now because of all that gunfire, you're going to have zombies show up. And that's going to force both groups to then retreat and run away, not necessarily from each other, but from the zombies. And it might even force the groups to coalesce together and run from the zombies because, well, I might be fighting with you for that last can of soup. We both know we have to survive the zombies or we become another one of them that's going to eat the other. So you end up with these really interesting motivations for the player characters by having the zombies be kind of this just force of nature that's coming. The other major thing that we introduced that really kind of, I don't want to say it curtails combat, but it certainly curtails the high action, die hard gunslinging combat is our infestation deck. Now, I know you wanted to touch on innovations a little bit later in this, and I'll leave describing what that does till then. But the infestation deck at its most root core is like having Jared Gunning come and sit at your table next to the GM and whisper horrible, evil things to do to the players in his ear throughout the entire game. You won't ever have that GM that's too soft and cuddly to run Dead End to its worst degree. Every time you play Dead End, it's going to be a meat grinder because the infestation deck is on the table.
So basically more like a random, it's kind of a random table of events, but with cards. Is that how?
No? Sort of. It's, you think of it kind of as the adventure deck, but if the adventure deck was written by a horrible, nasty GM like Jared Gunning.
Okay, so it's still played by the players or the GM?
Yeah, it's based off of player choice. Okay. Player choice causes the GM to draw one of the cards.
So the cards are played directly from the deck. No one gets to draw and pick them. But it's all of the uses of the infestation deck are driven by actions the players have to take, or if they enter a new scene where there's a certain infestation level. Like I said, we'll get more into the gritty of that if you want. We talk innovation. It's just more the idea of the infestation deck acts as that. This is the constant source of struggle. And it's going to introduce the players in new situations to things like sickness. It's going to introduce, scarcity of resources. It's going to introduce those things so that you aren't 100% focused on the combat constantly. Plus, it only really comes out in loud noises. So unless you've got gunplay, you're not going to see that curtailing like melee combat.
Oh, gotcha.
The other big thing that you're going to find really drives the struggle the player characters are trying to face down is their humanity and morality. Because you were talking about you're going to have those social interactions. Well, what if your social interaction is, I introduce as a GM the idea that you come across 3 school-age children with no one to watch them. Now you've come across 3 kids in the wild in the zombie apocalypse. Well, the moral thing to do is to bring those kids on as part of the party, but they're a huge drag on the party's resources. It's 3 children. They're not going to do watch for you. They're not going to do chores for you. They're not going to kill zombies. They're literally just going to be baggage the player characters now have to carry from scene to scene and take care of. So we had this morality system where you absolutely can choose to like abandon the kids on the side of the road so that you can maintain your resources. But if you do, you end up with special hindrances that we've created that are called derangements.
Oh, okay.
And you end up with these flashback moments that the GM can use against you, where you're in the middle of a combat and your friends are all loading into the car. And the GM says, hey, Eric, all of a sudden your character has a flashback to those kids he left on the side of the road and thinks your friends are going to leave without you. What do you do? So you end up with almost an inter-party conflict in moments like that, depending on how the GM plays these. But you end up creating these interesting scenarios that don't require combat to resolve, but they do certainly challenge the players in new ways. And I think the reason we shifted in that direction was a question we used to get on the GM Hangout and that we get all the time in emails is, how do I challenge my players? How do I challenge my players? They're just mopping up everything they're facing. And Jeff, being a long-term Supers GM, was always like, well, don't challenge them with combat. Challenge them with other things. If they're supposed to be heroic in a moment, make the heroism have a cost. Put other challenges in place. And that's what we tried to focus on with that end. And then Suede came out, and we kind of made a bit of a left turn to follow some of the Suede mechanics, and combat became a little more visceral. And that's where things like the Infestation deck and some of the other stuff that we've got had to be brought in, because Suede certainly took Deluxe and made it a little more pulpy. Things like the Joker's Wild suddenly being a regular rule and not a setting rule. Well, we had to find a way to adapt for that, because we had thrown Joker's Wild right in the bin. It wasn't going to be part of Dead End. It just didn't make sense to give out extra bennies when the players weren't really spending bennies the way they would in a normal game, since they can't soak wounds. So it really does drive your focus away from combat and into resource gathering, scavenging. We've got an entire scavenging system in the game that incorporates how quietly can you gather those resources, what's the likelihood that you're going to draw in either other survivors or other more infected. But we've got an entire mental illness system in the game based on just this idea you're under stress of the end of the world. Stop and think about, the idea of what we're all going through right now with self-isolation, and everyone's a little more familiar with the idea that, we need to check in on those people that maybe are at a higher risk of not being able to handle the stress right now, because they don't have those daily interactions where they can, be around their friends, hug them, and get that reassurance. That's something we built into Dead End a couple years ago. And we put in the idea that, you hold up in a nice cement strong structure. The zombies aren't going to beat down that building, but you get to listen to 100 zombies right outside your door moaning all night long. You don't get any sleep. You don't get to relax. This is not a relaxing evening of rest. This is absolutely a constant meat grinder of stress that the characters are under.
Yeah, that Night of the Living Dead would that cause some kind of fear or mental anguish?
Oh, absolutely.
Mechanically,
we have rules for two sides of that. We have a rule where the zombies actually have kind of a fear attack that they do with their moan. That acts as a test and does all the things that Suede gave us with tests now, where you can make people distracted or vulnerable and things like that. But the other side of it we have is just this idea that, the character's under this constant stress, and you're going to have to make fear checks a little more often. You're going to have to deal with this constant stress. And we really took a look at fear and went, fear works great in a pulp setting where you have this table to roll on to see what happens. In a zombie setting where it's going to be literally there in every scene, it felt like having a table that told people how their character reacted took away too much of the player's agency. So we've taken a step back from the way Suede handles fear and gone with a different mechanic where you get to role play your character's reaction 100%. And the only mechanical effect is you're immediately shaken, and you might gain a level of fatigue depending on how you do on the dice roll. And that way, we've got this long-term effect, the fatigue and the shaken, that mechanically handles the fear, but we let the players kind of explore what fear looks like for their own character, because, again, it's such a central theme to what's going on.
Nice. So I would imagine the book's already written. Maybe a question for Jeff. So if I were to open that book right now, what would I find besides, character creation, setting rules? Is there a plot point campaign in there? Maybe improvised weapons, more weapons, a big bestiary, or it's just a zombie and then a bunch of NPCs? How big's the book? I want to see the book before it's out, basically.
I mean, the book is decently sized, I would think. It's obviously it's not printed yet, so I don't have an actual page count. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot in the book. There is a weapons table there. Someone else will have to correct me. I'll be honest, I am not a rules person. I'm the lore guy. There is a huge section in the book that is filled with places, effects of the apocalypse, how the different how different societies have handled it over the time, and things like that. That was my section of the book itself. I know there's rules in there though for like improvised weaponry, and you're going to find things in the apocalypse. You're not hopping over to the store and grabbing yourself another gun or a box of ammo or whatever. You're not calling out for takeout. The only things that are calling out for takeout are zombies in this set. So, well, and other survivor communities, I guess. But in all, there's a lot in the book. We tried to get a sampling of everything across the U.S. and put in something for each basic area. I mean, obviously, if we were to sit there and tell you what happened in every single city and every single town, the book would take us, 30 years to do and have to be updated because the world's changing. But we have I want to say we have a pretty good grasp of a lot of the different places. And each place feels a little different. We really tried to play to the areas. If you're in an area like New York City, for example, that society that's going to build up around the apocalypse is going to be way different than if you're, down by the bayou, or if you're in a big, vast, open area. I mean, you can't do the same things. Towns that are smaller feel smaller. They really feel like there's a couple of places in there that are lightly hit. There are some places in there that are extremely heavily hit, and there are some places that are just gone. What we did was we have a threat level that is set that a GM can do as well, and our places in there are kind of the examples as well as the established lore sections of the world. Like New York City is virtually devastated. So that has a really high threat level to it. While, places in like Indiana, for example, that are in the middle of just vast open places, those are low threat level. And you'll feel that as a player with a GM who's paying attention to that. You can set it yourself. If you want to play Dead End in your hometown, you look at it and go, well, where am I? I'm in Chicago. Well, Chicago's filled with people, so it's a high threat level. I want to play it out in a fair, my town is really small. There's 300 people here, and I can walk for 2 hours and not see anybody. Well, your players are going to feel that too. You're going to start with a threat level that's very low, and threat level directly corresponds to the infestation deck that Dave was talking about. We've numbered the threats, and if you're, say, in a threat level 3 infestation deck cards are coming out right away. This is just what it is, because this is a highly threatening area. While if you're at a threat level 1, well, we're going to start play with 1, and maybe you can just avoid that hazard, negate it completely. It's very detailed. We tried to be realistic about it. We didn't want to put in, like Jared had been saying, Jared wanted a visceral approach to the zombie infestations, where the zombies can also kind of be backdrop. So we tried to mirror that in the setting areas and also in the threats. So, I grew up in New York. So the section in New York was based on how I've seen people every day. And then for areas that none of us have been to, we researched those areas pretty well. We tried to get opinions from people who are in similar areas, so that when you go and you play in these areas, it feels more realistic. The zombies don't fly. No one's out there with unlimited ammunition and amazing supplies. There are NPCs listed for all of these areas that are the typical type of people you'll find. You've got the person who just wants to be a trader. You've got the guy who's, trying to hold together a society. You've got people who just want to live their lives. This all happened and they just want things to be normal. So we've mixed that in there and had a few people look through it and everything else. And it to us, at least, it feels realistic. And as for like a plot point campaign and stuff, I believe Jared's probably the better one to answer for that one. So I'm going to turn it over to him.
Plot point campaign is part of the Kickstarter goal.
Nice.
It's already the plot point campaign is going to be, if we reach that stretch goal, is going to be the culmination of 4 years of playtesting those stories put into a plot point campaign.
A separate book or folded into the main book?
I believe Dave might have to chime in on this one. I think we're talking about a separate book.
So there'll be a miniature version that starts in the main book if we reach the stretch goal that we have for that, which is one of the very early ones that walks people through, I want to say, novice and seasoned, maybe only novice. I'm trying to remember. It's been a minute since we touched that part of the story. I mean, the novice story is something we play tested 3 years ago almost now. Okay. But
nobody makes it past novice anyway, right?
Oh no, there's been people who survive all the way to season or veteran.
We had one playtest that lasted 18 months, and 4 of the 5 players were still playing their original character at the end of the 18 months.
Nice.
I'm going to say this.
It's a meat grinder, but you get the right player, and they're not going to die. Right.
You can't be stupid.
Yeah, I'll say this about Dead End. We've play tested it with probably groups of 4 or 5 different groups of different people from different areas, different backgrounds. There's one constant that shows up in all this play tests that I just want to share with everybody, because I think what a lot of people are going to say is, well, God, that sounds depressing. Why would I want to play that? I play games to escape. If you love the zombie genre, this is your game, because everybody we've play tested with who's a fan of zombies gets it. They lean into the suck. They just embrace it wholeheartedly, lean into the suck, to the point where I've called them battered gamer syndrome. Like, make it this kind of, oh yeah, you're right, I'm sorry, I didn't do that right, I should have knocked on the door before I opened it, it's my fault completely. They lean into, I hear characters gleefully giggling like, oh, I'm about to die.
It's like the Cthulhu games, basically.
Yep. It's got that same kind of feel and tense. And then just to add something to what Jeff was saying too, there are complete factions of NPC antagonists in this setting that are well thought out. I mean, there's across the
Negan?
there's a Negan-ish. There's a couple of Negan-ish.
I was going to say there's a handful of Negans.
Yeah, there's a handful. I'll say this: one of the ones that I like a lot is what we call the DRT, which is a first responder term, short for dead right there. And it's used a lot by police and emergency medical techs when they arrive on a scene and someone's already dead and they've got to break the bad news to the family. We kind of twisted that. And these are people pretending to be cops and hospital workers, but they're really, really bad people.
So
they're driving
inspire
around
trust, but they're going to screw you over.
Yeah. And that's just one of the, I think, 7 factions. 7 plus factions we have in the game. There's complete survivor communities. It's a rich setting with a deep gazetteer. Lots of setting rule, new edges, new hindrances, a lot of new mechanics. It's an in-depth setting. This isn't a mini campaign thrown up on swag.
I have a question. So it sounds like the setting, the world is already kind of built out. So do you have it's probably towards Jeff since he did most of the lore on it. Do you have like a start date, like when everything started going to hell in a handbasket, and then you move on, and then like when does this setting? Yeah, the timeline. Like when does this setting, the world setting, take place? Like how many years after that, or whatever?
It's modern. It's modern era.
Okay.
The start date, ground zero of the apocalypse, is obviously ambiguous.
Okay.
It's not intended. We don't say, hey, this happens on such and such date and year. It's modern time. But you can drop characters and play at the very start of the zombie apocalypse or 2 years into it. It doesn't matter. The rules still stretch and play out to all of that.
Yeah, we purposely left it nebulous on that. We didn't really want to set the problem with setting kind of specific dates is if it's really close by, then you kind of feel, oh, it's next year. And then after next year, you go, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't play this. Even though it's just a game, in our own heads, we look at timelines and go, well, that's not right. At the same time, because the world is constantly changing, like if we set it, let's say 3 months from now, and, events have happened in your area that we don't put in the book, then it feels wrong in that way. And the other problem with kind of setting it in the future, read through some of your favorite settings, like read Cyberpunk these days, the original books, and how everything is dial-up. Nothing is dial-up anymore. It feels wrong to play into this world where everything is cable operated and everything's on huge hard drives when, you can put the entire contents of those books in your watch. It feels wrong, even though it's still fun. So we just said, you know what? We're putting it as the world ended. Right now it's the apocalypse. Your characters probably don't care what the date is at this point anymore. They're more concerned with where their next food's going to be and, how do we make sure that Bill doesn't wake up and bite the guy next to him rather than, oh, it's my wife's birthday. Nobody cares anymore. So that was a purpose choice on our end.
Yeah, I like that. That's pretty cool.
Here's a question for Carl.
Adjust it. Hold on one second. So, Carl, just to add on to that, you could adjust it. Let's say you want to say, hey, it's 10 years into the future since the zombie outbreak. Almost all the zombies are gone. And whoever survived is survived. Then you can just adjust threat levels and things like that in the game to make that fit.
Cool.
All right, go ahead.
So more like building upon some type of dystopia type of game, rebuilding the world with DRT people that are bad.
Yeah, there are actual factions that's what they're doing is they're trying to so we have one that is pretty much based around Army Special Forces out of Fort Bragg, and their whole idea is they're going to capture people and they're going to teach them how to survive, and then they're going to turn them loose. And we got another one that's based out of Atlanta, Georgia, based around the CDC. And you have sort of like a military hero that was there that was part of the campaign that saved the city, and he's trying to like lead things. And meanwhile, like a rogue religious figure is starting to kind of build a group up to just sort of overthrow him because there's obviously something going on. We've got like a lot of interpersonal setups in a lot of our story arcs and our gazetteer that if you read in and you tweak with them, you're like, there is something definitely wrong with all of these bright, shining oases in the wasteland.
Yeah, let's call everybody to go to this place, but once they get there, they're screwed anyway. That's common tropes too.
One of my favorite ones is actually DC. Washington, D.C. is a swamp. It's like legitimately a swamp because of the Potomac. And I created a faction for them called the Surveyors. And what they are is a bunch of conspiracy theorists that think that the government is hiding out in some secret vault in D.C. So pretty much everybody's just going through all of these documents trying to figure out where all of the congressmen and world leaders are because they don't know that they've fallen back to a military institution. They think they're actually in the city.
Nice.
I mean, you could. There's enough here with the rules and the Gazetter that you could recreate The Walking Dead season 1 through 10 and play it.
Yeah, I would stop at season 1 because that's the best one.
You probably have a lot more character death than occurs in The Walking Dead, but
Yeah.
playing out The Walking Dead with this setting if you wanted to.
All right, so Carl, so the guys came to you and they had a vision and they wanted a certain look for the book, and I really like the look of the jump start. So what did they ask you, and what was your thought process to, making this visually right, striking, and accurate?
Right. So they gave me, I think maybe Jared gave me the some examples of like posters and stuff that he's seen, like movie posters and some Walking Dead posters, and I gave it like kind of a red and black grungy look, based on a lot of things that I saw. Some really grungy fonts and stuff like that. They wanted a really visceral looking, worn in grunge look to it. So, but yeah, they were a lot of help on that, on getting my ideas churning on what to do with it. Especially how we do the photos too. All the photos are photoshopped with like a grunge look to it and stuff like that. So there's no bright colors or anything like that in that jumpstart. So I think we're going to probably carry on that look into the book. So it's fun to do. Actually, it looks really they had a good idea, and so I think it looks pretty good.
We went with the grindhouse style of art.
Yeah.
I took. We were in the meeting and we were talking about it, and so I showed the guys a clip of a TV show called Blood Drive. Where it's about vampire cars, and Jared was like, "What is this?" And I'm like, this is Blood Drive. This is like the grindhouse style. So then Sensei Gunning decides to go on a quest to learn all about grindhouse, and then he comes back with exactly what he wanted for the book.
Yeah.
And Carl nailed it.
What Justin's not mentioning is the 3 weeks that I had to constantly go, we're not making a vampire car setting. We need to finish Dead End. We're not making a vampire car setting. We need to finish Dead End.
That's the next one.
Maybe.
Nice.
The next 3 are already on the docket, already in pre-production. Nothing else is going to take us 4 years. But I swear I will rip the toes off of anyone who talks about it.
I know how it goes. Someone gets another idea and then all the other projects get pushed down. Let's do that instead. So, Dustin, details about the Kickstarter, the date, rewards, that kind of thing.
So they decided that the best thing to do is we're going to put Dustin in charge of the video. And when I say they, I mean Dustin, because he's an idiot and he volunteers for everything. But it's going to be April 17th through May 15th, which is great because our One Shot Wonders line always drops on the 15th. So the Kickstarter is going to wrap up just as One Shot's coming out.
I just want to point out those dates
Are not hard dates.
on some things happening. We've got a couple of things behind the scenes that have to line up before we can actually open the Kickstarter. We're trying to get as close to that range as we can.
But pretty much
It'll definitely be in the next 30 days. Definitely in the next 30 days.
It's either one of two things that's going to happen. Either we're going to have it out on April 17th, or I'm going to end up editing out the dates for the video. But yeah, we are going to have different types of goals, different pledges, and we are going to have what's called survivor rewards, which means that if you share and if you pledge more, then we're going to add more items to the rewards based off of the fact that you're sharing out the Kickstarter. So I got the page up right now.
If anyone remembers the ETU Kickstarter, where they had that secondary set of rewards that were based on the number of people who pledged rather than the dollar amounts hit, that's what our survivor goals are meant to be. It's how many people can we rescue before the end of the world during the Kickstarter, and the sheer number of people unlock specialty stuff.
Any vanity rewards?
Oh yeah. So we've got let's see, what is it, the Savior, or is it the Savior Plus? But pretty much we have the ability that if you back at a pretty high level, you can create your own faction. We have somewhere in another product, not in the main book, you can actually be one of the archetypes. And then the final reward, I don't know, guys, can we talk about this? At Gen Con 2021, we all plan to be there, and the people that back at the Savior Plus actually get in on a game with all the creators.
Nice.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Dinner and a game at Gen Con 2021.
Yeah,
that's the plan.
that's awesome. Yeah, maybe I'll create a faction. Nobody wears sleeves in that faction.
I feel like they should all there should definitely be a hockey and poutine theme going on with that group.
Sorry, Eric. Canada fell hard. There's nobody left in Canada because they were too polite to the zombies. So
Please come in.
sorry about that.
Yeah.
So one of the things that Dustin kind of touched on there is he called it an archetype book. We're actually calling it People of the Apocalypse or Everyday People. And what this is it's a level that we wanted to give people the ability to back at, that you actually end up with a character pre-built by us that's set up for Dead End, with your photo associated with it, with the background you provide associated with it. And that's the one we've got the largest pool on. We're doing an unlimited pool for that vanity reward. It doesn't matter if we get 5 people or 400 people who back at that level. All of those people are going to go in a separate PDF book that is just this People of the Apocalypse. And we've got other archetypes we can fill that book with, but we wanted to release a book that gave people kind of a pre-made character that they could take right into the apocalypse and play themselves, essentially, if they really wanted to.
Yeah,
or
for the GM to use, right?
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. Like, if we get up with, 20 or 30 of these, and you sit down to play with your local group, now you've got a set of pre-generated characters they can pick from, of people they might know who are friends of theirs. And, you sit down and Gary wants to play as you so that he can, put you through all horrible things, because we all know how Gary treats you. So Gary ends up playing as your character just so he can put you in horrible situations.
I'll tell you one thing that some people may or may not like, and this one was like, oh, I feel so bad for Jared in this one. We've got the zombie toolkit which means that you know, like Mr. Absolute Purist is like, no, we're not going to do it. No, we're not going to do it. I can't stand them. They don't run. And so finally we're like, well, if we get to this level, what about a toolkit where they could actually have those different zombies? And he's like, fine.
Yeah, we'll go back if we reach that stretch goal level. We will go back and create modern media zombie type versions for Dead End as a separate thing. So if you want belching, toxic, radiated zombies, okay, you subscribe to that level. Here you go. If you want Resident Evil zombies, here you go. If you want anything that's been a zombie in a modern movie franchise that isn't really a zombie, then I'll go ahead and we'll create it for you.
Yeah, zombies shambles, psychos run.
Well, that would increase the value a lot. The toolkit aspect of a book, that's what interests a lot of people, I know. So, all right, guys, anything else you want to add to this? Your final sales pitch here?
I mean, I think the biggest thing I want to touch on that we haven't really delved into at all is just the sheer number of things that aren't in the jumpstart that people have coming to them. You know, we do have a significant number of edges and hindrances. We have the entire morality and humanity system, the derangement system, the infestation deck, which we talked about a little bit, and then to top that off, we've got the trauma damage. We've got all these things that make this feel like Savage Worlds, but not play like anything else. And the thing that stands out to me after doing as much playtesting as we have is, like Jared said, we've got 20 or 30 different people who've gone through and played in this setting. We'll turn around through just a one-shot later on, and they won't soak their wounds. They'll talk about, not being able to re-roll again because they got a 1 on the wild die. Like, all those little rules become so second nature after you've played with them that I have a player now who I'm constantly telling, no, you don't get to add a new penalty to your dice roll because you thought of a creative way to make the situation worse for yourself. We were playing in a game just the other night where the players go in and they're doing kind of a failed bank robbery, and this player consistently wanted to add like a -1 or a -2 to everything and kept adding little things to the scene that made it that much harder for the players to succeed. And I was like, you're gonna die if you keep this up. But he's in that lean into the suck and lean into the dead end style of play so much. He's bringing that into even like our Western games and stuff.
I'll add this one thing that we kind of glossed over a little bit or failed or didn't mention in the setting. One of the things I really like is a mechanic we have in here called motivation. And the idea is, well, why would you write a motivation when you create your character? And this is a very easily achievable short-term goal that basically keeps you from eating a bullet. It's your reason why you're going to survive the zombie apocalypse because you've got to do this thing. And it may be as simple as take a shower, eat a Twinkie, drink a cold beer, whatever your motivation is. It should be something that's fairly easily achievable. And when you get that, you get a survival chip, which gives you all kinds of special rewards that kind of break the dead end, horrible, horrible rule system of keeping you down.
Carrot and the stick. Okay. Gotcha. I like that.
And I do just want to throw this out there. I know it sounds like this is such a horrible setting. The adventure deck is used in Dead End.
Yeah.
So all the swingy nature you get from having players holding those adventure cards from the adventure deck also exists within Dead End. And I believe the Kickstarter has a stretch goal to add 5 or 6 Dead End specific cards.
Yep. It does.
Nice. So even the
infestation
card that makes the villain grow bigger so we can have giant zombies. Jared, you allowed that?
I've got to peruse that deck first. So there's going to be a limitation on what's in there. Anything that's a magical effect is not going to work in the system because there's no magic. But we got to look at it.
Yeah, maybe in the toolkit have something. If it's Resident Evil for the toolkit, something like psionics. Maybe people are going to want to add magic. You know it, right?
Oh yeah, if we get to the zombie toolkit, I will go ahead and push my love of the purest zombie down. If people want to see this project succeed that badly, I'll throw the bone out there, and I will not give it a half-ass treatment. It will be an actual, okay, let's do this. Like everything we do in Atomic Ninja, it's not half-assed. So,
like, we will bottle his tears and bring them with us to the actual Gen Con meeting.
Yeah, that's more. You were talking about motivation. That's motivation for a lot of backers to just.
It ships with a bottle. It ships with a vial of tears. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome, guys. Well, I'm really looking forward to it. Hopefully, you can launch as planned on April 17th. So everybody, just go check it out. I'm going to try to add a link as soon as I get one from these guys, so you can have your pledge button ready to be pushed on the site, and maybe we'll see your face in the book. I know it was really popular for Wise Guys, so I anticipate you guys are going to see a lot of people that are going to want their face in there, and a treatment from Carl, probably a filter treatment to make it look gnarly. Is that what the plan is?
So that was the initial plan, and Carl kind of pushed back a little bit and went, guys, I've got a lot of people who want me to do some work. So we actually have lined up another artist to do the treatments on backer reward photos.
Oh, nice.
But
okay.
Carl wrote the entire Bible document on how to do that. So it's not Carl doing it, but it's Carl's process, and Carl's, he has final approval over any images that actually end up in the book. So
yeah, hear the secret.
He's absolutely on tap as the guy doing the project, but we're not making Carl do all the grunt work.
Okay. Yeah, leave some of us races to use his talents.
Oh, and as we're closing down the podcast here real quick, Eric, I'm going, if you don't mind, I have something I want to pimp it.
Yeah, sure.
Atomic Ninja versus COVID-19. Enjoy your quarantine starting Monday. All titles at our drive-through RPG store will be.
Wow.
So you can get, so all of those one-shots you guys
all the
have been wanting
titles
to play. Yeah.
Everything goes to pay what you want for the next 30 days.
Yeah, very
starting
nice,
Monday.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, that's very fit. Yeah, like you said, COVID, the dead end, that's very fitting. Maybe hitting too close to reality to what's going on, but perfect timing, I would say.
We
definitely understand that, it's one of those things that kind of hits a little close to home right now. And it was a decision we made kind of early on, as soon as COVID kind of broke out, is that we wanted to do a couple of things around it, because it was going to obviously go right through the meat of our Kickstarter period. So there's another major announcement that we'll have kind of right at the top of the Kickstarter page, and that is anyone who backs the Dead End Kickstarter gets kind of the unfinished working document as soon as the Kickstarter closes. We're going to get that out to all the backers, because it just doesn't make sense that while everyone's, under quarantine, under lockdown, and doesn't have anything to do, to make them sit and wait to play this game till we get the art finalized, until Carl has time to make the book look pretty. Like, all that stuff is great, and we know that, there's a reason that we've got a decent price tag on this Kickstarter. There's a reason that we're pushing to get as much art and whatnot into the book to give it that professional look that everybody wants to see. But at the same time, everyone wants to play a game right now while they need that escapism. So we want to get the version of Dead End that we have and we've been playing for years into everybody's hands, even if it's not 100% done, which it's 99. There's a few final tweaks we have to do with the book. Mostly we have to have our editor look over it and make sure that the four of us can know how to spell and use grammar properly. But we want to bring that book to people as quickly as we can, so that you can start playing and enjoying it even when you're locked down.
Awesome. All right, check it out, guys, and thanks for all our guests today, and even co-host who's also a guest. So, thanks, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Wild Eye Podcast. If you would like to get in touch with us, our email address is thewildeye@gmail.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and now Twitch. We also have a Patreon at www.patreon.com/thewildeye. The Wild Eye Podcast would like to thank the following patrons: Uncle J. Raz, Rob Towell, Conrad Erasmus Neubert, Corey Judd, Emma Wakeland, Kevin Stanley, Perry Chalmers, Ray Aracia, Dan Brown, Yan Jetmar, Manuel Sams, Mr. Stagg, Zovia RPG Maps, Chris Grant, Robert Dorgan, Andy Hall, Brian Kaser, Daryl Catsier, Jans Karnheim, Patrick Greenlaw, Sid the Squid, the Digital Dungeon Master, Knuckle Dave Anderson, and Tori Bjertnes Peterson. Thank you. We'll see you later.